Hi and welcome to the brand new episode of Home Assistant running on Synology in Docker. Today we are going to install PuTTY. We'll start in 10 seconds. So what is PuTTY? PuTTY is network-wide ad blocker. What PuTTY does is intercept DNS requests from devices attached to your local network, and it checks them or compares them against known sites that serve ads. Installation of PuTTY has several steps needed to make it work. First, we have to create new network, or better to say, we have to enable Docker to provide PuTTY its own private IP address in the same range as your other local or home devices. For example, if your Synology device is on network 192.168.1.109, we want to give our PuTTY a different IP address but in the same range. Second step, of course, is installing a Docker image. Third step will be reconfiguration of your network. Fourth step will be, of course, installing it inside Home Assistant. So let's start with the installation of PuTTY. What we have to do first, of course, is we have to log into our Synology device. Next step, of course, is to create all the needed folders. Let's go to our Volume 1 Docker folder. And let's see what we have so far here. Configurator is here, Grafana, Home Assistant, Influx, MQTT, Node-RED, Portainer, and Zigbee to MQTT. Now let's make a new folder, and let's call this folder PuTTY. Let us go inside this folder because we have to create a couple of additional folders. So change directory PuTTY-hole, and let's make here two new folders. One will be called etc-pihole, and the next one will be called etc-dnsmasq.d. Let's check what we have. So we have those two folders created. Next thing what we have to do, we have to create a virtual network driver, Macvlan. What this driver will allow us, or what this network interface inside the Docker will allow us, it will allow us to use different IP address for our PuTTY than what we would normally do. For example, if we would just create Docker and configure it to use host, then it will of course be on the same IP address as the Synology. And if we would do that, then we would have port conflict between the ports that Synology uses and the ports that PuTTY needs to work. So in order to create a new port, what we have to do following. First thing we have to do is we have to type IP ADDR to get the list of all Ethernet or network ports our Synology has. Okay, this is a long list. I have a couple of them. It's Docker is up, Docker, Ethernet 3, Ethernet 0. This is my address of the Synology, so I'm using port number 3. It's called ETH0, Ethernet 0. We have to remember this because we will now use it in our Macvlan network that we will create. Let's clear this and let's start typing the command. So it's sudo docker network. So super user do docker network create. So we will create new network D, and we will use driver Macvlan. Next thing what we have to do, we have to define our subnet. So previously we've seen that my subnet is 192.168.1.x. So my subnet is 192.168.1.0, and I'm using the whole range. Next thing what we have to do is we have to define range. What we'll be using, so it's IP range. There are a couple of options. One option is what I will be using here is to use -32. This will limit the range to only one IP address. I only need one IP address in this range, and this address will be used as pi-hole. For example, you can use -30 to get, I think, 2 addresses. 24 gives you whole range, but starting from 0. So it depends on what number of IP addresses you need. But for this pi-hole, we only need one. So it's 192.168.1.199. This is the address I will be using, and -32. This address I will be using, and only this address. Next thing what we have to define is our gateway. This is typical network gateway that you already are using inside your network, and usually this is 192.168.1.1. For me, I have 2 gateways, and I don't use 1.1, but for test, let's say that this is your standard ISP router. Next thing what we have to do is we have to define parent network adapter. So parent network adapter is what we've seen earlier. In my case, Ethernet 0. This is for my test environment. In my production environment, this is bond 0, I think, because I'm using a bond connection to combine 2 Ethernet ports into one. And last thing we want to do is we want to name this network. It will be called pi-hole network. And that's it. Our network is created. Okay, we can now jump back to our Synology. And in Synology, let's see in Docker network, we now have new network with no connected containers. So pi-hole network is empty. Next thing what we have to do is we have to create additional network, and we'll do this through Docker. And let's finish installing pi-hole through Docker too. Okay, so let's add it, use manual configuration. We will create completely new subnet. Let's first name it. Let's give it pi-hole bridge. Now let's choose different subnet. So it's 192.168.2.0, and we will be using whole range. Whole subnet. Next thing what we have to do is we want to define range. So for me this will be 192.168.2.2, and we will be only using one address. And we want to define now gateway for this subnet or for this bridge, and this will be, of course, address 192.168.2.1. More or less, this is it. We just press add, and bridge should be created in a couple of seconds. Okay, so we have pi-hole bridge and pi-hole network. So let's go to registry. Let's type pi-hole. This is the image we want to use. Let's press download, latest. So we now have a new image. It's not still downloaded. And pi-hole is now downloaded. Let's launch. We'll call it pi-hole. We don't need to use high privilege unless you will be using pi-hole also as your DHCP server. So let's leave this uncommented for now. Let's go to advanced settings. We will enable auto start, volume. We have to create a couple of volumes. We previously created 2 folders. So let's now add those 2 folders also here. One will be Docker .pihole and dnsmasq, and we will mount this folder with the etc-dnsmasq.d. And now we will also add another folder, Docker .pihole, and this folder we will connect with etc-pihole. Next, what we have to do, we will have to add networks. So we will choose Pi-hole network, and we will choose Pi-hole bridge network, and we will remove bridge network. Those are the two networks that we created previously. One is Pi network. It allows us to use standard IP address that is different than Synology, and bridge network will be used to connect Synology with the Pi-hole. Port settings we can leave as is. We are now using, or we will be using, different IP address than our Synology. For the environment, let's leave everything as is, but let's add a couple of variables. First of all, what we should do is we should add dnsmasq listening, dnsmasq listening to local. What does this dnsmasq listening allows us? It allows us to use or to listen to both internal and external network and bridges, so we cover all our networks for the Pi-hole functionality. Next thing what we have to do is we have to define time zone, and of course my time zone is Europe, Zagreb. You put here your own time zone. Next thing I will put here is I will define here my password, because it's much easier to do it from here than to browse through log files and see what password was generated. So let's type web password, and I will put here random password, but of course I will try to remember it. One thing I'm not sure if it's needed or not, but it's called virtual host, and I will put variable virtual host here. Virtual host, and I will call it Pi-hole. Let's just check if everything is okay. Okay, here we have to correct the value and type our server value. It's 192.168.199. If you remember, this is the IP address that we reserved for our Macvlan. Okay, let's apply this. Click next and apply. Let's check the container. It looks more or less okay. Okay. Before we proceed with the final steps of the installation, let's just check and make sure that everything is working okay. For that, we will go to Portainer, and inside Portainer we will go to Containers, and we will go to Home Assistant. We will go to Console, type here root as the username, and let's try ping. First we'll ping IP address of our Synology device. It's working okay. Next we will try to ping IP address of the Pi-hole server. It's not working. And after that, let's try and ping the Pi-hole bridge IP address. It's working. So as you can see, this is the reason why we created this additional bridge, so we would be able to communicate between Home Assistant and Pi-hole server. Let's do just one more step. Let's go to PuTTY, and let's see how our Synology server sees Pi-hole. So we'll ping, sorry, we have to type first sudo ping 192.168.1.199, and nothing. Now let's try to ping 192.168.2.2. Sorry, forgot ping. And it's working. This is the reason why we have to configure in our Synology that we want to use this newly created IP address, bridge IP address, as our, let's say, gateway. To do that, let's go back to Synology. In Synology, let's go to Control Panel, Network, and here we'll configure that we'll be using Preferred DNS Server 2. We'll click Apply, and this should be it for your configuration of the Synology, and this also includes configuration of the Home Assistant. And last step, now since you've changed your IP configuration, it's recommended that you restart your server. So you should restart, and it will take you about 5 to 10 minutes for your server to get back up. Let's close this and let's go back to Home Assistant. In Home Assistant, let's go to Configurator. Let's scroll to the bottom of the file, and at the bottom of the file we type pi-hole, 2 spaces, host 192.168.2.2. This is the IP address of our pi-hole bridge, and we type also SSL false. Save this, go to configuration, server control, check configuration, and let's restart our server. Our server is back online. Let's go to Overview, and I already created pi-hole. There are a couple of entities already here. So I've added pi-hole sensor for ads blocked, percentage ads blocked, queries and cached and forwarded. Also there are 2 graphs, ad blocks and DNS queries cached. As you can see, still the entities are unavailable, and that's normal. It takes 5 minutes for data from pi-hole to arrive in Home Assistant. Let's wait 5 minutes. And after approximately 5 minutes, data has started coming in Home Assistant. A bit of warning here, unfortunately, since this is a workaround in regard to the network and everything, you may experience problem installing it. Unfortunately, this is not a bulletproof system, especially if you have some kind of a bit different network configuration or any kind of special routing or DNS services inside your network. Because of that, I will also record additional episode of pi-hole installation inside Docker, where I will be using port forwarding, and we will be keeping our Synology IP address. And before we go away, let's just check how pi-hole looks inside the web browser. You just have to type in the address of the pi-hole server, and when you type your address, for me this is 192.168.1.199, you will get this user interface. Let's go to admin panel. This is a non-logged in user admin panel. Here you can see all the requests the DNS server received. Let's log in. Let's type in our password. And here we have detailed information in regard to queries, domains, and etc. You can of course play around with the other various settings. For example, choose different DNS upstream servers, select custom IP addresses for DNS servers, etc. But this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any kind of a comment or a question, please leave it down in the comment section. If you still haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell button so you get notified on future updates. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. And I will be seeing you in 7 days where we will be installing Edgard Home Edition also inside Docker. Thank you very much for watching. Until the next time, bye bye and have fun.